Hi there, my name is Pat Fader and I am an instructor at Milwaukee Area Technical College. The intent of this screencast is just to go over the critical skills necessary to use VMware Workstation. So there's a lot, I could spend hours talking about the product. This is the top level, give me the bare bones. What do I need to do in order to run a virtual machine? So with that said, here we go. Real quickly, what is a virtual machine? What is VMware Workstation? Well, here, let me give you a real quick example. So VMware Workstation is a piece of software that's been written that allows me to run multiple operating systems. So VMware Workstation is currently running a copy of Linux for me and also a copy of Windows 7. So my host computer is Windows 10, I'm running Linux, and I'm running Windows 7. It's obviously you can see in IT how what a great learning tool this is. This allows students to sit in front of one machine and to experience and to learn multiple operating systems. Virtualization has really taken over IT. It's amazing how quickly it's growing. Right now, I believe the estimate is that about 85% of the server workloads are virtualized. So if you think about that, you go back 10 years, there were hardly any servers that were virtualized. Now we're looking at 85% of our server workloads are being virtualized. I'll give you a graphic of what that might look like too. So here's a picture. A company prior to virtualization would have a dedicated print server, web server, file server, etc., all running. So this graphic here, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 6, 7, 8 servers running, as opposed to having 6 machines running all at 10, 15, 20% capacity. We can virtualize each of these servers, meaning we can take all the files. We can think of the hard drive. I can take the hard drive, copy that, convert that hard drive into a folder structure, load it onto my single high-powered server, and this single box here could then run all of these operating systems. As far as the outside world is concerned, there's still the same physical servers running, but actually it's not. These machines have been virtualized. One physical box, multiple servers running inside of that box. There's a ton of benefits you get with this. For example, fault tolerance. I could have these virtualized servers running on one box, and if this box goes down, they could automatically migrate over to a different box and continue running. So as far as the end user is concerned, they have no idea that that a machine's gone down. They just their servers are still up and kicking. So anyways, that's what we see happening in in businesses. Obviously, these businesses aren't going to use VMware Workstation for that. VMware Workstation is a consumer level product that's meant for people to play with and learn multiple operating systems. Real quick, another example of virtualization, which I think is kind of interesting. So here's a web page that I logged into, and I have access to a Windows 8 desktop. It's a little slow, but what's going on here is MATC gives us a web portal that, as an instructor, I can access a virtual machine. So when I log in, a virtual machine is created, and you would think, MATC would think that I'm on campus working on this VM, and I'm not. All right, another example. School districts, insurance companies, they love that virtual desktop idea. They're able to give all their end users low-end computers, and when an end user fires a machine up, they log in and a virtual desktop is created, and all the processing is happening back on a high performance server somewhere else. That also makes things like pushing out updates, scanning for viruses a lot easier. If all of your users desktops are stored on a single server somewhere, you can actually add Windows updates, scan for viruses all on that single server versus having to go into each discrete user's computer. So I got sidetracked. I apologize, but that's virtualization. It's big. It's not going anywhere. And VMware Workstation is the first step in learning more about virtualization. So I really want to just make it easy for a student to start using VMware Workstation. And I think the best way to do that is I'm going to assume that you've come to one of our classes and you've downloaded some of MATC's pre-configured virtual machines. So in ITnet 110, we use three computers: two Windows 7 machines, these two here, and then a server. So So let's say that you've got these machines at home and you're like, well, now what? How do I run them? The first thing I would say is, even though you probably came and you copied them onto a USB drive, or perhaps you downloaded them, you really want to get these machines running on your host computer. I've had students that have tried to run these VMs, including myself, off a USB drive, and it works okay, but it's not fantastic because again, you're having to run your machines. It works better to run them off an internal disk. And to make things even faster, if you have a SSD drive, these machines run much better. So I'm going to fire up this Windows 7 machine here, and before I fire it up, let's see what it looks like. It's a collection of files. So basically, if I think back to that graphic, if I had a Windows 7 machine, we'll say this one right here, the files in that folder that we were just looking at would basically consist of all the information, consist of this machine's hard disk, as well as they would describe how that machine is configured. And what I mean by that is, one of the files in here, it's this file right here, actually has things like, well, how much RAM is this virtual machine assigned? How big is the hard disk on this virtual machine? So there's some settings that are also stored in this collection of files. So at the end of the day, all that you have to know is, I came to MATC, I've got some virtual machines, 1, 2, 3 of them, and I want to run one. All right, so let's run one of those virtual machines. I'll just do a file open. And let me browse to that machine, W7-1. That one settings file is the only one that I can select. Let's hit the open. Okay, I haven't turned it on yet, but I can show you the top 3 settings that you'll have to be concerned with when running this virtual machine. First of all, how much RAM are you going to give this virtual machine? My host computer, the one that I'm recording this screencast on, has 16 gigabytes of RAM. So if I'm only going to run one virtual machine, I might as well take this RAM setting here and let's move it up to at least 4 gigabytes. It'll run faster. If instead of having 16 gigabytes of RAM, let's say I'm on a lower end computer with only 4 gigabytes of RAM, well then I'd probably want to, I could probably add this, I could bump this up to 2 gigabytes. That would leave my host computer 2 gigabytes of RAM and my virtual machine 2 gigabytes of RAM. Now obviously I'm running a couple other virtual machines here, so I'd have to look at how much memory has been assigned to these as well. Our pre-configured machines are going to give you 1 gigabyte of RAM. So we figure a student, if they have more than that, if they have more resources at home, crank it up. Just to give you an idea of like how much RAM is, what's enough. ITnet 110, I think you can get by in 4 gigabytes of RAM. And that's a bare, you're just getting by, because typically you're only running 2 machines at one time. So you can give each machine, 1.5 gigabytes of RAM, and then leave your host computer the rest of the RAM on your system. When you get to ITnet 112, you're running servers, and I would say you're going to want to look at 8 gigabytes of RAM. And then if you get to ITnet 157, our VMware class, where we talk more about virtualization products that are used in the enterprise, well, hold your breath. Our lab computers have 24 gigabytes of RAM. So that's that. Obviously you can control like how many processors on your host computer are assigned to your virtual machine. But at the top 3 is RAM settings first, network settings second. So think of it this way. How is this virtual machine going to talk to the outside world? And if I look at my settings here in the network adapter, I can pick bridged, NAT, or host only. There's some other ones we can look at, but the top 3 are bridged, NAT, and host only. What do they mean? So bridged, if I pick bridged, and I drew something up. So bridged is what I have right here. In a bridge setting, I have one host computer. That's in my example right now, a Windows 10 machine. And I am running 2 virtual machines. Those 2 virtual machines, their network adapters, are tied directly to whatever network my host computer is tied to. So that is bridged. You take your VMs, you tie them directly to whatever environment your host machine is on. Well, that's good and bad. I mean, obviously they're directly connected. The bad piece is I'm currently running two Windows 7, one Windows 7 machine here. I just installed it prior to recording a screencast, and I don't have any antivirus software on it. I have no idea what state my firewall is in. It'll work just fine for lab activities for ITnet 110, but I sure as heck wouldn't want to go and start buying things off of eBay or Amazon without getting some additional software loaded on this VM. So, just keep that in mind. So that's bridged. The other setting was, well, here, the other setting was NAT, which is this right here. If you look at the difference here, well, I guess there's a couple. One is I have this router installed, and I have a DHCP server. These are both provided by VMware. And in NAT, network address translation, your virtual machines are behind a router. The router it works the same way as if you have like a Time Warner or something. Your router will hand out IP addresses to all the internal devices in your house, and any traffic that comes out of one of your home machines goes through your router. The router takes off the internal address and puts on an external address, which is like right here on the router's port, and that traffic goes out to the internet. So with NAT, network address translation, we've added a router to insulate your VMs from the rest of your environment, and we've also added a DHCP server. And some of you are saying, well, Pat, this is bugging me. You have one additional network adapter drawn on your host computer. How did that happen? Well, when you install a VMware workstation and then you pick this NAT, there is an internal virtual network adapter that's added to your host computer, and that virtual network adapter gets the same address that your VMs, off the same subnet that your VMs get addresses, and allows your host machine to talk with your VMs. All right. We can configure this DHCP server and we can configure this router. By default, if you just pick NAT, it's going to work. Kind of like, I'm pretty sure if you on your home network, you took your home router, you plugged it in. A lot of people say, it works fine. Maybe they'll change a password on their Wi-Fi or something, but they just keep working with it. If you want to get kind of dig more into it, you can actually configure how your router works at home. Well, if you want to get more into it, you can configure how your router works in VMware. I'm not going to go into it now because the screencast goes from being 30 minutes to until I run out of breath, right? So, but I will show you if you want to play with it on your own right now, click Edit, Virtual Network Editor, and you can get into configuring your DHCP server and your router there. Okay, so I've talked about bridged, directly connected, NAT. Slap a little internal router in between there, and also a DHCP server. And then finally, host only. What does host only mean? That means your VMs cannot get to the outside world. That might be a good thing. So look, this is host only. Our VMs, there's a VMware workstation still provides a DHCP service to assign addresses to your virtual machines. Now obviously you could just assign static addresses to your VMs and say, I want to make my own address space up and disable this. That's fine, but anyways, it is there if you want to use it. Your VMs can talk to each other. They can talk to your host computer, but they cannot get to the outside world. My cloud is supposed to be the internet here. So those are your 3 network settings, the 3 most important ones. Okay, so I've talked about memory, I've talked about network adapters. The next most important setting is your CD DVD. Okay, and I have to just talk a little bit about, well, how about I just talk about it instead of talking about it. So I can take my virtual machine and I can either connect that to my host computer's physical DVD-ROM drive, or I can fake the virtual machine out and I can let it think it's connected to a DVD-ROM drive, but instead it's actually connected to an ISO file. ISO file. What's an ISO file? Well, an ISO. So here are the ISOs you get with ITnet 110. One of them is a Windows 7 Windows 7 Professional ISO. We took a Windows 7 DVD, the same DVD that you would use to install Windows 7 on a physical machine, and you can use software to take all the files on that DVD and that file structure and the booting information and basically stick it into a single file, an ISO file. It's kind of like if you use WinZip or some software that's used for zipping up files. You can take a whole bunch of folders and files and compress them into a single file. So just like a zip file is used for compressing up a folder structure, an ISO file is used for collecting and condensing an entire DVD into a single file, an ISO file. So For example, if I jump on this machine that's running Windows 7 right now, and if I look at its settings, and if I go under DVD, and I say use ISO image, I could, once I find my ISOs, I could say take the Windows 7 DVD and put that in that virtual machine's DVD-ROM drive. Hit the open button there. So I've connected it. It says connected to power on. Mistake that some students make is somehow that one of these gets unticked. And they're like, Mr. Fader, Pat, I fired up my VM. It doesn't see the DVD-ROM drive. Well, it's because you got to connect it. All right. Good. I've connected it. In a few seconds, I may hit the pause button. Let's see if we go. Oh, there it is. So my Windows 7 DVD has now been added to my machine. Can I disconnect it? All right, we'll do them both. Well, where'd it go? It's gone. I disconnected them. Okay. Why is that important? Because if I'm going to make my own virtual machine, I need to add the installation disk to that machine. So I downloaded a copy of this Ubuntu here, Linux, and a little while ago. So I downloaded an ISO file. I made a new virtual machine and I mapped the ISO file to that virtual machine's DVD-ROM drive. Maybe I'll show that at the end of the screencast here. I'm trying not to get sidetracked, which I do. So far, we've talked about what virtualization is, why it's important, why you need to learn about it, how cool it is that you can run multiple machines at one time. I did not mention, so this is VMware Workstation 11. I believe it's like 12 or 13 is what we're at currently. When you obviously just run the latest and greatest. Don't be like me and run an older version. If you're running on a Mac, you can use VMware Fusion. All the virtual machines that we make to run in VMware Workstation also work in VMware Fusion. The one advantage of Fusion is that you can also create a Mac OS virtual machine as well. So if you want to see how a Mac works with a Windows device in VMware Fusion, you can do that. Oh, the last thing, just about VMware. So I like as mentioned, I just made this machine a little while ago. If I click on the tabs here, it says reinstall VMware Tools. VMware Tools was automatically installed when I created my virtual machine. VMware Tools, and if I look at a different one, if I fire this guy up in a little bit, I may have the option to update VMware Tools. VMware Tools, it's a set of drivers and software that gets loaded into your virtual machine, and it allows you to run. It allows your graphics to work better, and it allows your like your mouse and things to work better. It also what it'll let you do is, let's say that I have you can't see it right now, but let's say I've downloaded some file and I want to copy that onto my virtual machine. As opposed to worrying about like a network share or something like that, I can just drag the file from my host computer to my virtual machine and it copies it in. So VMware Tools allowed that to happen, and I can copy it back out to my host machine as well. All done with VMware Tools. Real quick, something that I like, just so you can see how I use VMware Fusion. I have a Mac laptop, MacBook Pro, and on that I have a Windows 10 virtual machine. So if there's certain tools that I like, that Visio program that I used to create this amazing network diagram. I could have, as opposed to having like a separate as opposed to having a separate Windows machine at home, I used to have a Windows 10 virtual machine loaded up with all the software that I typically use, Microsoft Office, Visio, to create this. And just again, it's another benefit of VMware. Be careful with this button here. This is Unity. If I click on it, I'm pretty sure it's Oh, this is it. Enter Unity mode. What you can do, since some people like myself, or they might use VMware as opposed to just purely a learning tool, they might use it to They might have some VMs set up with specific tools on them. If once you enter Unity mode, what it does is it allows your host machine to display all the applications that are loaded in this virtual machine. It's kind of cool, but also, I mean, I don't like it. So if I put my Windows 10 machine in Unity mode on my Mac, then all of a sudden, when I go under my applications, I see all these Windows applications on there, and I have to remember, okay, if I click on that one, it's going to fire up my virtual machine, and then it's going to load. Anyways, that's what Unity mode is. Probably the other button that I use a lot on here is these three here, Control Delete. If I hit Control Alt Delete right now, as I'm recording this, it just sent the Control Alt Delete to my host computer, my Windows 10 machine. If I hit this, it sends a Control Alt Delete to my virtual machine. That's important when you fire a VM up and you want to log into it. Okay. Another thing that's quite helpful, maybe it's bugging you that I have this space around the outside here. Once your VMware tools are installed, you can select VMware, not VMware, you can select View, Fit Guest Now, and that pretty much stretches out your desktop to make it, fill up your entire VMware workstation window. I mean, also maybe your VMware workstation window gets kind of small. You're like, well, this is stupid. Now I have to scroll down to see my whole desktop. Well, I could pick View, Fit Guest Now, and it resizes the desktop to fit the VMware workstation window. All right. I have some notes. If you saw my desk, you'd laugh at me. I have like little post-it notes, all the different things I wanted to talk about. And since this is my second time through, I run the risk of repeating myself. But I guess that happens in my face-to-face classes as well. Snapshots. Another thing with VMware that's amazing is, let's say that here I'm looking at this. I haven't even fired up my Windows 7 machine yet. I got sidetracked. We're talking about memory, hard disk, or network adapter, and CD. But think of a snapshot as being like a time machine. So if I run my snapshot manager, somebody went through and created this virtual machine for you, and at 3 points in time they created snapshots. So and as you progress through the course, as you get towards chapter 6 through 14, you need your virtual machine to have additional settings on it. So what that person did is they started with a base Windows 7 machine, they did a bunch of activities on it, and then took snapshots. So if I go to this snapshot here, click it and hit Go To, my machine is going to jump ahead in time to the way it was configured for chapter 6 in the book. If I want to go back and repeat chapter 2 in the book, I'd have to go back to my snapshot manager and go there. So now all the crud that was done from the beginning of the course up to chapter 6 was kind of undone. How can I use that in a working machine? Well, here, let's say I've got a Windows 7 machine and I'm about ready to try some new software on it. Maybe what I want to do is just take a snapshot. All right, sure, take a snapshot. All right, and now I'm going to install some software. I'm going to play around with it. I don't know what it is. I'll just my software goes crazy and it puts all kinds of additional files on my system that I don't want. My system becomes unreliable. Maybe I've used this virtual machine to go out to a website, and I'm thinking, yeah, I think I picked up some malware, which happens on my Windows 10 machine on my Mac. What I can do then is just go back, snapshot, revert to snapshot number 1. Well, actually, I prefer students to do this way. I prefer students to go to the snapshot manager to get more of a visual on it. Okay, go back to snapshot 1. Let's go there. Are you sure? Everything you did, you're going to get lost? Yeah. Okay. So what's happening now is that machine. We're going back in time. So we're going back to the way the machine was 5 minutes ago. And if you notice, this snapshot actually the snapshot was the running state of my virtual machine. So even if my machine was turned off, here's how to turn the machine off: VM, power, shutdown, guest. You can say power off, and that isn't elegant. As opposed to doing a shutdown, that's like taking your VM and just pulling the cord on it. Are you sure? Yep. Boop, it's off. So this is like, if you're at home on a physical machine, you get a power spike and your machine just turns off. That's what I just did. I can go back to my snapshot. Snapshot 1. Yep. And it's up and running. Okay. So if we circle back, if you are in my ITnet 110 class, you've got a couple other virtual machines that you can play with. You could, in VMware Workstation, do File Open, Server 1, open it up. I haven't tested some of these. I think when my 7.2 machine got corrupted in my copying, and on this machine here, I can look at my snapshot to see if I have anything. Not too exciting. I just have one snapshot, so I could probably go back to there just to get it to a known state. You sure? Yep. Oh, this is good. It's like I almost planned it, and I didn't. When you get one of our machines, and if it's asked if you moved it or copied it, just say I moved it. If you say I copied it, and you'll learn about this more in Cisco or Network Plus, but if VMware Workstation thinks that you moved a machine, so it's thinking, oh heck, there might be, or if you copy the machine, it's going to say, oh, this person may have 2 or 3 copies of that machine running out there. It's going to, one of the things that it's going to do is it's going to assign it a new MAC address, and that can cause problems on some servers. So anyways, when it asks, did you move it or copied it, I said that I moved it, and we're up and running. Heck if I know what the logon is on this yet, so I don't know. Maybe that's not, maybe that's more we need to know right now. There we go. Good enough. So that's just again how to use a virtual machine. Once the machine is shut down, shut it down. You can change some of the virtual machine setting while it's running. I'd prefer, it typically works better if the machine is shut down. Like I shutting down here. I want to, what else do I want to do here? I want to look at my notes. So I've talked about VMware tools. I've talked about the 3 main settings, the RAM, the network adapter, and the DVD ISO. I've talked about snapshots. So I'm sure you see the benefits of snapshots. We look briefly at the folder structure that our VMs consist of. And I think what I'll do real quick, and if you want to just say I'm done listening, that's fine. I'm just going to show you how I created that Linux machine, or even that Windows 7 machine real quick now. Okay. Oh, hope you didn't. I hope too many of you didn't turn it off yet, the video off yet. But anytime you change your snapshot, in addition to capturing the running state of your machine, it also captures all of this. So for example, if I change my RAM up to 8 gigabytes, and then I go back to my snapshot, say go back to snapshot 1 here. Yep, you sure? Yes. Fine. When it does that, what's going to happen is our RAM setting is going to go back to the way it was. So the reason this is taking a little bit longer is when we took this snapshot, the machine was left on. I may go back and change that by the time some of you students, by the time this gets out, the rest of our students here. So power this thing off. Power it off. 2 gigabytes. Okay. All right, let's just take a look real quick at how I made our Linux machine. So I decided I wanted to impress you that I knew so much about Linux. I don't. I have used a little bit of Linux in mucking around with these Raspberry Pis. If you're not familiar with those, you can Google them. But how did I do this? So started off on Google, and I just put in Ubuntu DVD, and I ended up downloading an ISO file. We talked about ISOs already, and this is the ISO that I got. D drive. Ubuntu 1510, okay, 64-bit version. And then I stepped into VMware Workstation and I said, let's make a new virtual machine. I like picking custom. I have a little bit more control. I know a little bit more what's going on, but you could try typical. It's up to you. And hardware compatibility, the default is fine. Basically, if you're trying to be backwards compatible, some people running some old crud like me, right? You could dial it back a little bit. It's pretty amazing how many resources our VMs can consume. Obviously, this is these things make more sense in a enterprise environment. I then have to, I think I'll just say I'll install my OS later. And we'll say it's Linux. It right away assumes if Linux, I'm running Ubuntu. It's fine. It's important to see where your machine's going to go. Next. We'll give it one processor. We'll give it 2 gigabytes of RAM. As far as networking goes, I'll use NAT. You know what? I'll just tie it directly to the classroom network here. I'll go to defaults when it comes to our hard disk controller. I'll make a new virtual hard disk. There's sometimes somebody might give you a pre-configured virtual hard disk. I'm going to say make a new one. And in an enterprise environment, you may map a physical disk to one of your virtual machines. It's possible. Maybe for performance reasons you're going to do that. This is important. Do not hit allocate space now. If I do that, my file size is going to jump up to 20 gigabytes. It means it's literally going to take a 20 gigabyte slice off my hard disk. If I don't check that, basically my hard disk files just kind of grow as my operating system does. And I can choose to store that up to 20 gigabyte hard disk as a single file or split it. I like splitting it. I think it gets chopped up into 2 gigabyte chunks. It just makes it more transportable. Some file systems don't allow for huge file sizes. Maybe you're going to copy this to a USB drive, so splitting it up makes more sense. Next, that's the name of the file. Next, finish it off. Okay, so I've just made a virtual machine. I need to say, let's double check my DVD here. Take that DVD and connect it to the ISO that I downloaded earlier today. There it is. Open. Okay. Let's turn it on. We're booting up. And out of this, you can at least see that your virtual machine can take over your USB devices. And it's kind of like my kids. It won't share it. So if your VM decides to use the Lexar my USB drive that's plugged into it, then my host computer no longer has access to it. We're booting up. And I think what's going to happen now, it's going to say, it's interesting that it says that we're now offline. That'll probably change. I'm going to try it. If I hit install, then basically it's going to take the install files and copy it to that virtual hard disk. But also, if you're aware, there are things called live CDs, which is essentially the entire OS is loaded on a DVD, or in our case, an ISO. So right now everything's running off the ISO, and in that 2 gigabytes RAM I assigned to our VM. I'll pause it. Okay, I paused it for 5 seconds. But okay, so here's my copy of Ubuntu, and someone's going to probably say I'm pronouncing it wrong, but I'm not sure if we have network access yet or not. Well, it's not my fault, right? Let's look at our settings real quick. Interesting. It doesn't say it's connected. Connected power on. It's not connected. Hit OK. Well, this is a problem, right? Let's try. You're all laughing at me, but that's okay. I can't hear you. So let's just try changing our network adapter to NAT. It might take a few seconds. Well, when in doubt, reboot the thing, right? I think you get the idea. Here, I'll send a control delete to the machine. I'm just going to restart it. VM power. Restart the guest. Yep. All right. We'll come back to it. But anyways, you get the idea. So I hope this has been helpful. I mean, I know it went really long. I apologize for that. I think you get the idea. There's so much more I could talk about. There's a lot of settings in VMware Workstation for the more advanced user. But at the end of the day, I think you know enough now to use our virtual machines that come from our classes at MATC. If you want to make your own, I gave you a start. If you look on my website, you can just Google my name, Pat Feder, Feder, and I've got a video on how to create a Windows 7 VM. I'll probably update those over time as well, but there's plenty of information out there in creating your own VMs. All right. Have a great day, and thank you for listening.